Section 1, Chomsky, the man, the myth, the legend. Noam Chomsky is like the Beyoncé of linguistics and political activism. His influence spans across multiple generations and disciplines. He's a big deal. Born in 1928, this American professor, writer, and political activist has been shaking things up for decades. From his groundbreaking work in linguistics to his relentless critique of political systems, Chomsky has left an indelible mark on the world. Chomsky is known for his sharp critiques of US foreign policy. He doesn't just point out flaws, he dissects them with surgical precision. He's like that friend who always calls you out, but in a good way. You know, the one who makes you think deeper and question your assumptions. Chomsky's work has had a massive impact on how we think about power. He challenges us to look beyond the surface and understand the underlying forces at play. He argues that it's not just about who has the biggest stick, but about who controls the narrative. The stories we tell ourselves shape our reality, like why do we think what we think? Whose interests does it serve? These are the questions Chomsky urges us to ask. He's written over 150 books and countless articles. His prolific output is a testament to his dedication and passion. That's a lot of words, even for a wordsmith like him. Each book and article is a piece of a larger puzzle he's been assembling for decades. His writings cover everything from linguistics to politics, and he's not afraid to ruffle some feathers along the way. His fearless approach has earned him both admirers and critics. Chomsky's basically an intellectual rock star. His influence is felt far and wide, transcending academic circles. He's inspired generations of activists and thinkers to question authority and fight for a more just world. His legacy is a call to action for all of us. Section 2, Power and Ideology, Decoding the Matrix. On Power and Ideology is classic Chomsky. It's a deep dive into the mechanisms of control that shape our world. It's basically the red pill from the Matrix, but instead of waking up in a vat of goo, you wake up to the harsh realities of power and control. The book dives into how those in power, like governments and corporations, use ideology to maintain their grip on society. They craft narratives that keep us compliant. Think of ideology as the software that runs our brains. It's the code that dictates our thoughts and actions. It shapes how we see the world, what we believe, and how we act. It's the lens through which we interpret everything. Chomsky argues that those in power don't just want our obedience, they want our consent. They want us to believe in their version of reality. They want us to buy into the system, even if it's rigged against us. They need us to believe that their way is the only way. He breaks down how propaganda, misinformation, and the control of information are used to manipulate public opinion. It's a sophisticated form of mind control. It's like they're playing a giant game of chess, and we're the pawns. Every move is calculated to keep us in check. But Chomsky's not just about doom and gloom. He believes in the power of awareness and education. He also offers a glimmer of hope. By understanding these mechanisms, we can start to dismantle them. He believes that by understanding how power operates, we can start to resist it. Knowledge is power, right? And with that power, we can begin to create a more just and equitable world. Section 3, The Invisible Hand of Power Shaping Our Thoughts. Chomsky argues that power structures like governments and corporations have a huge influence on our thoughts and beliefs. They're like puppet masters, pulling the strings behind the scenes, but instead of strings, they use things like the media, education, and even our culture to shape our perceptions. He calls these mechanisms of control necessary illusions. Basically, they're the stories we tell ourselves to justify the existing power dynamics. These illusions prevent us from questioning the status quo and keep us from demanding change. Chomsky's not saying that we're all brainwashed zombies. He acknowledges that we have free will. But he also stresses that our choices are constrained by the systems of power that shape our world. It's like trying to run a marathon with a 50-pound weight strapped to your back. You might be able to move, but it's going to be a lot harder. Section 4, History Repeats Itself. Lessons in Power and Control. History is full of examples of how power structures use ideology to maintain their control. Take the Roman Empire, for instance. They used bread and circuses, basically free food and entertainment, to keep the masses distracted and docile. Or look at the Cold War. Both the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in massive propaganda campaigns. to demonize each other and justify their own actions. Chomsky argues that these tactics are still being used today. He points to the war on terror as an example of how governments use fear and nationalism to drum up support for their policies, even if those policies are ultimately harmful. By looking at history, we can see how power operates and how it's been used to manipulate and control populations for centuries. It's like a cautionary tale, warning us not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Section 5: Chomsky in the 21st century, still relevant, still fighting. Chomsky's work is arguably more relevant than ever in the 21st century. In an age where technology and media are omnipresent, his insights into power structures and media manipulation are crucial. With the rise of social media, the 24-hour news cycle, and the increasing concentration of media ownership, it's easier than ever for those in power to control the narrative. The digital age has amplified the reach and influence of these entities. Think about it, a few giant corporations now control most of the information we consume. This consolidation means fewer voices and perspectives are being heard. That's a lot of power in the hands of a few. The implications for democracy and public discourse are profound. Chomsky's been warning us about this for decades, and now we're seeing the consequences play out in real time. His critiques of media and power are more pertinent than ever. He's been a vocal critic of the Iraq War, the drone program, and the erosion of civil liberties in the name of security. His voice has been a constant reminder of the costs of unchecked power. He's also been a strong advocate for social justice movements like Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter. These movements echo his calls for greater equality and justice. Chomsky's work reminds us that the fight for a more just and equitable world is ongoing. His writings and speeches continue to inspire new generations of activists. We can't afford to be complacent. The challenges we face today require vigilance and active participation. We have to stay informed, challenge the status quo, and hold those in power accountable. Chomsky's legacy is a call to action for all of us. Section 6: The Media Machine, Manufacturing Consent and Controlling Narratives. Chomsky argues that the media plays a crucial role in manufacturing consent. He's not talking about some vast conspiracy theory, but rather about the subtle ways in which the media, often unknowingly, reinforces the dominant ideology. Think about it. Who owns the newspapers? Who funds the TV stations? Who decides what stories get covered and how they're framed? It's often not the people's interests at heart. Chomsky argues that the media often serves as a mouthpiece for the powerful, amplifying their voices and marginalizing dissenting views. This creates a distorted view of reality, where the interests of the elite are presented as the interests of everyone. It's like that saying, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? If a story doesn't fit the dominant narrative, will it ever be told? Section 7: The Illusion of Choice, How Power Maintains the Status Quo. Chomsky argues that we often live in an illusion of choice. We think we're making our own decisions, but those choices are often limited by the systems of power that surround us. It's like being presented with a menu that only has two options, both of which are owned by the same company. He points to the two-party system in the United States as a prime example. Sure, we have a choice between Democrats and Republicans, but both parties often serve the interests of the wealthy and powerful. This illusion of choice keeps us passive and prevents us from imagining or demanding real alternatives. It's like being stuck in a maze where all roads lead back to the same place. But Chomsky believes that another world is possible. He argues that by breaking free from the illusion of choice and challenging the systems of power, we can create a more just and equitable society. Section 8: Challenging the Narrative. Chomsky's call to action. Chomsky's work isn't just about understanding how power operates, it's about resisting it. He calls on us to become active participants in shaping our world rather than passive consumers of information. He encourages us to question everything, to think critically, and to challenge the narratives that we're being fed. Don't just accept things at face value. Dig deeper, ask questions, and demand evidence. Chomsky also stresses the importance of collective action. He argues that real change can only happen when people come together to demand it. It's like that old saying, united we stand, divided we fall. Whether it's joining a protest, writing to your elected officials, or simply talking to your friends and family about these issues, every act of resistance matters. Section 9. Why Chomsky Matters, a Legacy of Truth-Telling. Chomsky's work is a testament to the power of ideas. He's shown us that one person can make a difference, that speaking truth to power can spark movements, and that a more just and equitable world is possible. He's been called the conscience of our time, and for good reason. Chomsky's unwavering commitment to truth, justice, and human rights has inspired generations of activists, scholars, and everyday people to challenge the status quo and fight for a better world. In a world saturated with misinformation, propaganda, and spin, Chomsky's work is a beacon of clarity and integrity. His legacy will continue to inspire us to think critically, question authority, and fight for a more just and equitable future.